the idea that every single voter should leave after casting their vote. What is the general impression or perspective or reaction to that there in Lera district?
According to the areas I've been to in Lera district, the number is so high, and even that 1 hour is not enough. That means good number of the voters will not cast in their vote because they started like 3-4 hours late. So extension of 1 hour is not enough because I went to different polling stations where there are so many voters and they are eager to vote. And even if they add even up to 6 still, some people will remain. Maybe apart from the city here where I went, people were not as many as in the villages. And also to stand about 20 meters away from the polling area, yes, I saw people were there. They were not really complaining, but they were not very many. So, Sandra.
All right, Julius, thank you so much for joining us this evening and bringing us up to speed on everything happening in Lera City. We'll definitely be returning to you later on to hear from you again what will happen after 5 p.m. Will they extend it a little more, or will we be sticking to the 5 p.m. time limit? That is exactly what we just heard from Lera City. Voter material delays, it's the conversation we're seeing all across various polling stations across the country. The materials have been delivered quite late, but what is clear, there is high voter turnout in this electoral cycle, and that is quite impressive that Ugandans are coming forward to participate in this civic activity. But right now we want to take you to Uganda District to get an update of what is happening there, but also to understand, you know, what is different there. Could it be different? Could the voting materials have been delivered much earlier, or is it still the same story that we've seen elsewhere? But also to give some perspective before we go, some polling stations are actually using the biometric machines, and other polling stations have resorted to the manual way of voting. How that is going to affect this election, we wait to see. Let us look at what is happening in Ginger. Well, those pictures coming through from Ginger sent to us by our reporter Jim Akiria, also showing a little bit, proper turn-up of the voters, and we'll be updating you on exactly what happened there much earlier when we get a chance to speak to Jim Akiria, who's on ground, to bring us up to speed on exactly what could have happened there. Well, as you are casting your ballot today, hopefully you are, you do know that you're choosing your president that is going to lead you in the next 5 years. We do have 8 presidential candidates, of which we have President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, who is the current president of Uganda, and he's going in for his, if he is elected, he will be serving his 7th term, and he's just cast his vote much earlier in Rachitula, and also the NUP candidate, Robert Kyagulanyi, we did see that he voted here in Kampala, in Magere, and we also saw that Robert Kasibante did cast his vote in Mityana, and Joseph Mabirizi, also a candidate, did also cast his vote in Zana, calling for a general reaction to the election, saying, should we actually be going in for these elections? Is it important for us to be looking at that? Of the 8 candidates, we are seeing that only 2 we are seeing that Elton Mabirizi, Robert Kyagulanyi, Mugisha Muntu also, and Yoweri Kaguta Museveni are actually taking second jab at the presidential election. Now, we want to quickly hear thoughts from yet our colleague who's on ground to also bring us up to speed on what's happening there. Priva, are you there? How is it going? How are you feeling about today's election?
Yes, I am. I am, Sandra.
Yeah.
Of course, the pressure is picking up. Like you already mentioned, there's been a high voter turnout. But at the end of the day, time was very limited, thanks to the Electoral Commission chairman, Justice Simon Byabakama, who decided that they should be extended at least 1 hour. So that means there's 30 minutes left before everybody who is among the registered 21 million voters will be casting their ballot. Before we continue with that conversation, let's first touch base with Naweru and see the latest updates coming from there as people choose the leaders for the next 5 years.
Denga ana mutano ne wajja RDC Rwanga Charles badde nkwata bifaananyi nga batuusiza obubox bajjako siiru zino n'atuma omusirikale wabadde yeebise feesi n'ampita n'ambuuza nemweyanjulira nti nze Jjunju Moses nkola ne BBS Telefina era ne kaadi yange eno n'agikwatako bw'ati n'asoma erinnya nga lyeryo n'ambuuza gundi eriwa accreditation okuva mu isi ne mugamba nti isi yatubuulidde okusomozebwa kwe yafunye ku kugaba accreditation zezo nti ne batubuulira nti baagabidde abantu abagenda okubeera mu kifo ekitongole ekigenda okukuŋŋaanirwamu obululu bwonna. N'aŋŋamba si kituufu. Ne muga isi yatugambye bw'oba ne ID ya company olina gissa mu kifo ekirabibwa buli omu era obeere ng'okavalinga akalulu kano mu bulambulukufu. Tabiwulidde mbadde nkyayogera ebyo byonna producer wa BBS waffe nankubira nga ayagala mu embeera eriwo ku kisaawe wano e Nabweru. Mbadde nkwata essimu nti n'ajinjijjako era producer sisobodde kumutuusaako bibadde bigenda mu maaso. Essimu n'ajinjijjako, kamera ne bajinjijjako, n'alagira abasirikale bankwate era ne bantwala ku poliisi wano e Nabweru. Ne bambuuza neyanzikiriza era ne mbanyonnyola ebintu byebimu isi bye yatubuulidde. Era mmazeewo essaawa ndowooza emu n'ekitundu ku poliisi nga bambuuza 4 na 5 era nga mbanyonnyola ekintu kyekimu kubanga isi yatubuulidde kiki kye tulina okukola era ne UCC yafulumizza ebiragiro bye tulina otambulirako era sisuubira nti ku ebyo byonna waliwo bye mbadde mmenye kuba mbadde sirina story yonna gye naakoze okuggyako okwata ebifaananyi era bye mbadde nina abadde baŋŋamba obisiimuulamu naye ne ŋŋaana nga RDC agamba nti sirina lukusa kukola mawulire mu kalulu kano olw'okuba nti sirina accreditation.
Well, that's a situation that has been happening in Nabweru. Now let's switch gears and talk about Nakawa. How has the situation been since 7 a.m. up until now? Let's check out that report.
Lots of incompetence, deliberate and otherwise, that's been exhibited in this process. The Electoral Commission knows they've got 5 years to prepare for an election. But then it happens and it's as if they learned of it last week. These biometric voter verification kits, which they have been throwing in everybody's faces, saying this is the panacea to the progress of our country's democracy. We said, look, we used these machines in the last election. They failed. These machines were used in the most recent census. They failed, largely. What's going to be different? Said, no, they are going to work. We shall use them mandatorily. But, yeah, last minute, people get to the polling stations early enough. They want to cast their ballots. However, 1 hour, 2 hours later, 3 hours later, 4, the machines have failed to work. Until the EC says, okay, now let's get back to using the manual voters' registers. Ridiculous. We spent billions of shillings as a country, taxpayers' money purchasing these machines. So all that has gone down the drain. And then, of course, in many other pockets, like here, this is supposed to be shared grounds, 18 polling stations with 12,500 voters. They had been placed inside the barracks. I wrote to the EC, I said, the law prohibits this because there's no easy access to the barracks. So they said, okay, we'll put them out. But even when they put them out, closed off the roads, they still said, let's let them try and do some machinations. So our agents who are meant to establish the registered voter is the one who is here to vote. They told them, you sit away from here. We are doing the right thing. So why are they agents anyway? Why do we send them? So you can clearly see all the different machinations because they know they don't have a vote. People are tired. So they're trying to wing it. But regardless, the people of Uganda are saying enough is enough. Time is up for these fellows.
Well, that's the situation happening in Nakawa, and just like the leader of opposition, Joe Senyonyi, said, what happened in the rest of Uganda was not any different from what happened in Nakawa. The polling materials arrived very late. The biometric machines also were not working. And on top of that, as taxpayers, a lot of money was spent on purchasing the biometric machines. I'll be handing over back to studio to Sandra and to continue with the conversation that has been happening.
Well, thank you, Priva, for giving us yet another perspective on how elections are looking like in the rest of the country. But as you spoke about the current concerns, I couldn't help but reflect again on the various manifestos. Again, we do know that the incumbent was also vying for the presidency. Once again, his manifesto theme is on protecting the gains, making a qualitative leap into high middle income status. There's emphasis on protecting the peace, security, and also infrastructure infrastructure built over the years. But of course, critics have said, what gains are we protecting? Should we always stay in the past, looking at the things that have happened before, or should we look ahead and say what new developments do we need to be focusing on? Now, speaking of presidential candidates, Robert Kyagulanyi, who's arguably the biggest contender in this election, the theme is a new Uganda now, and some of the key pillars in his manifestos are pledging to restore constitutionalism, reinstate term and age limits, something that most political analysts have pointed out clearly, and end the trial of civilians in military courts. We've seen that happen over the last couple of years in regards to the opposition being tried in the courts, in the military courts. And today we've also seen huge, heavy deployment of the military, and that has been a concern from the opposition side. And let us now quickly hear from the NUP party once again, their thoughts on the election, what it means and some of the changes that they're seeing on ground, and what that will ultimately have on the election today.
So first of all, as you can see, you cannot describe this as an election. An election must have clear rules. It must have set rules which everybody needs to follow. Now this morning we started moving around. Voting was supposed to begin at 7 a.m. but by now in many places people are still calling us to find out what is going on, because the BVVK machines, which the Electoral Commission said were mandatory to be used in this election, have failed maybe at 90% of the places, or even more. I've been moving around Kampala Central. The only place which started voting at 7 a.m. is where the military votes from, at Summit View. Elsewhere, there was no voting taking place. I called the Electoral Commission as Secretary General of NUP, and the Electoral Commission said they have issued a new directive for people to vote manually. But remember, there is no internet. How does this information get to reach our people everywhere? That's why many people are calling me to ask me whether they should go on or not. But remember, not everyone will call me. Many people are going to be there waiting to see what the position is. I mean, some people came, because even, you see, the young people here have been asking me, should we accept to vote manually or not? Because the Electoral Commission, on the orders of General Museveni, said that manual voting will not happen in this election because it breeds multiple voting and all that and all that. So you can see the crisis we have. Now, what more? In Kampala here, they have deployed thugs, goons everywhere. People will see my car and see what happened in the morning when we went to Kisenyi to check out what was going on. Our polling agents were beaten up, and these thugs came and vandalized our car because they wanted to harm us. So that is the situation everywhere across the country. Now, aside from that, NUP polling agents across the country and supervisors are being picked up every minute. Our deputy president for Western Uganda was arrested last night. Our coordinator for Ankole sub-region was arrested. Our coordinators for the different districts, Mitoma, Rubirizi, where all of them are being picked up. In northern Uganda, it's worse. In Nwoya, in Obongi, in Kitugum, all these places, our people are being picked up. Agago and other places are being picked up and arrested. So how do you expect us to have an election where you're arresting polling agents, supervisors of the main challenger to General Museveni? So the election has been militarized completely. The BVVK has completely failed. Like I said, it could even be up to 99% of the areas. Voting materials have not reached in many places. You know, I've been talking to our people in Busega, in Chengera. These are places in Wakiso, but materials are yet to reach there. So it's very, very unfortunate.
Now that voting has been delayed by, should we have an extension at least for 1 hour?
First of all, I don't know if that will solve the problem. First of all, like I said, the biggest challenge is when you go into an election, there must be set rules, which everybody gets to know. The people of Uganda were told by everybody that this election must follow BVVK. Now, on the last minute, you say, let's do manual voting. We have already told the nation that there are so many multiple entries in that register. We have been revealing some of them, where you find the person is registered here at TLC and registered in Old Kampala. So this is really to show you that everything they're doing is a sham and it is deliberate. How I say it is deliberate is because, like I said, where the military is voting from, they started voting as early as 7 a.m. So you wonder why the BVVK was working at, for example, Summit View and not working in Kamocha. where they know they have no support completely. So that is to show you that everything is done deliberately to suppress voter turnout and all that. But also in a situation where there's no internet, where the media is heavily censored. How do we pass this communication to NUP supporters across the country now to tell them, okay, go and vote manually? How? Because there's even no way to communicate that nationwide. Imagine if we wanted to announce to the nation that let's stop this. How do you communicate to the nation in this kind of blackout? So that is a problem. People have come early to the polling stations, as you've seen. They know the rules. People came yesterday knowing I am going to go and my finger will be scanned or my eyes will be scanned. The person gets a polling station, and at 10 a.m. the rules are changing, that now everybody who's in the register is voting. The register, which we've already questioned because of the inconsistencies, the double entries, the multiple entries, and all these things. But I've also told you people, and I wish you could go to Chisenyi and see what is happening there.
We went there.
Some of these people are there seated in NRM cars giving money to people and then moving around beating up anybody who they know identifies with the opposition. They have chased away our polling agents from different polling stations. Criminal.
Well, the NUP Secretary General there giving various ideas and thoughts on today's voting process that could ultimately or will ultimately test the legitimacy of this electoral process. And as we speak about the failure of the biometric machines, we are counting down minutes to the very end of the voting process, at least in just maybe in case the Electoral Commission extends the time. But as it is, the election process should be ending at exactly 5 p.m. But with concerns around delays in the voting process, we've also been told that some places in Kampala have already started counting because they received the information on the extension to 5 p.m. a little late. But what does that really mean to the rest of the voters who are probably just entering the polling stations hoping to actually cast their ballots? We hope to get our reporters on ground to bring us up to speed on that. But just to bring some more context, once again, we were looking at 109,000 biometric voter verification kits that had been procured at about 267 billion Ugandan shillings. And now that is at stake. And all this is going to come through post-election, testing the legitimacy of this election. If initially the Electoral Commission had said we are taking this angle to avoid, one, the multiple voting, the staffing, voter fraud, concepts that we've also seen previously in the 2021 general elections, and that will be coming forward. And political analysts have previously argued that there was not enough, reform that was made to the electoral process, and maybe we are currently seeing a repeat of that. But what is clear about today is that the numbers of voters have been quite high in different polling stations. We are speaking about 50,000 polling stations across the country. The presidential candidates have already cast their ballots, but the biometric machines have still not been used. People turning back to the manual way of voting, but that implication is what we are yet to find out from our reporters who are currently on ground. But what is clear now is that some polling stations within the city have already started counting the votes. But what does that really mean, for the voters that were yet to cast their ballots? What is happening on ground? We do hope we can get our reporters on ground to bring us up to speed when it comes to that. Well, ultimately, we are looking forward to also speaking to reporter Simon, who's going to be joining us from Soroti. Once we get a hold of him, we'll be able to do that as quickly as possible to understand how Soroti is navigating the times. Internet is off, the biometric machines are off. We are currently speaking of delays. The voting materials have been delivered late. What does that really mean for today's election? Simon, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are literally, if my time is right now, just a few minutes, 14 to be precise. What does that mean for you in Soroti, for the voters in Soroti?
It's a pleasure being on NTV Live. I'm reporting from Ngora. I'm currently in Ngora, though I started my day in Soroti City. We actually voting started in some polling stations at 10 a.m., while in some polling stations, voting started at 11 a.m. because of the biometric machines that failed in most polling stations. So after consultations with the returning officers in Soroti City and then Soroti District, some polling stations had to go manual, while others where the biometric machines succeeded, that use the biometric machines to allow voters cast their votes. To be specific, in central polling station A and B, voting started at 1:45 midday. The first batch of voters who came, about 100, had to leave the polling station because of the biometric machines that had not equally worked. So when voting started, there were about 15 people at the polling station. So that to start with that, when information went out that the biometric machine at that polling station had started working, so I would see people trickle in to cast their votes to candidates of their choice. So from Soroti City, I crossed to Serere District. In particular, I was in New York polling station where Honorable Helena Dowa, the Minister for Fisheries, she equally went to that polling station at 7 a.m. only to find that the voter material and then the polling staff were not at the polling station. So she had to wait up to around 9 a.m. That's when the voter material was delivered in. When they brought in the voter material, the biometric machine wasn't working. So after consultations, they equally had to go manual. So she cast her vote and then she left to go and do other duties, actually supervising polling agents and then other electoral staff. From Serere, we equally crossed to Ngora District. In Ngora District, in particular, I went to Ngora Township Primary School polling station. That polling station, equally, the biometric machine refused to work. So after consultations with the returning officer of Ngora District, they zeroed on using the manual register. So people started voting at around midday at that Ngora Township Primary School. But in Ngora District, we have two counties. We have Ngora County and then we have Kapil County. In Ngora County, we have three candidates. We have Juliet Achayo, the incumbent of NRM, and then we have a former MP called David Abala, is contesting as an independent, and then we have Muhammad Osuguro of NUP. Ngora District has a total of 73,000 voters, and then they have 199 polling stations. The entire district has 73 parishes. When you cross to Kapil County, that is still in Ngora, it has a number of candidates who are contesting for the Kapil County. We have the incumbent called Isamat of NRM, and then we have David Livingstone Okurut of FDC. We have Ben Ochan of PPF, and then we have Julius Ichoto of DF, Democratic Front, and then we have James Oleja. James Oleja is also independent, and then we have one called Gabriel Onanye, is independent. But what makes Kapil County so interesting is that from the time it was created from Ngora County, it has become a stronghold for NRM, though we still have FDC also they are looking strong. And then with now the emergency of NUP, I believe the stakes are going to be so high in Kapil County by the time the ballots will be counted in a few minutes from now. In Kumi District, where I also had some time, the voter turnout remained so poor. When I moved across the municipality, I would see people going about with their businesses. They were not bothering to go to the polling stations. The polling stations remained so empty. and the turn-up was so pathetic that some electoral officials were seen sleeping because there were no people coming to cast their votes. I don't know why the voter apathy in 2026, because in 2021, by 7 a.m. to midday, you will see queues of voters waiting to cast their votes. But this time round across Teso, the voter turnout has been so poor. I don't know whether it is because of the biometric machines that refuse to work early morning. They could have sent mixed signals to people in their villages, in their homes, in the urban areas, not to go and vote. I don't know exactly what could have happened. The voter turnout in Teso is so poor. But on the sad note, in Kaberemaido district, the returning officer, one called Stella Modo Koryang, she's a born of Karamoja. Early morning, when she was heading to the electoral offices, she was assaulted by a group of youth who mistook her for an opponent distributing money. So when she rang the area DPC, that is Peter Akampulira, who intervened, they managed to arrest about 18 suspects who are currently in police custody in Kaberemaido Central Police Station. I tried to talk to the spokesperson of the Electoral Commission. He did tell me that they are waiting for that report from Kaberemaido so that they could know what to do, the next steps to do in regards to the 18 suspects who are alleged to have assaulted the returning officer, Ewan Stella Modo Koryang. Back to you, to the studio.
And it does, in a way, differ from some of the reports that we've gotten from elsewhere. But just to get your perspective again, we are 7 minutes away from 5 p.m., which is the official time for the last person to cast their vote. What is happening on ground exactly? You do paint of a picture of low voter turnout in some places. But in terms of the timing, how are the people in the Karamoja region taking that? Simon? All right, we seem to have lost Simon, but we hope to get back to him. From his perspective, the Karamoja region has seen a low voter turnout in some places, and that is, of course, attributed to the delay in bringing voting materials as well. But just to look back on the 2021 general elections, about 18 people had registered to partake in that election, and only 10. That is that is almost half, you know, the total number of people that registered. Only 10 voters cast their vote. What does that mean in terms of looking ahead for a country that has about 45 million people and only 21, that is again half, registering to be among the voters this 2026 election? What does it mean with these delays at the end of the day, having limited time to cast their vote and also starting really late? What will it really cost in terms of, you know, the clarity or the legitimacy of this election that we are looking at to choose leaders for the next 5 years? We'll be looking at that later on and looking at what is happening across different polling stations and what ultimately will be the grand picture of today's electoral process. Now, let us quickly look at what is happening in Nakawa in Nakawa, just to get the latest of what is happening on ground in terms of weather. You know, there's a different story that we're going to get. We've been hearing the same story throughout this bulletin, looking at people that have cast their vote, those that are showing up, and the timing of this ultimate electoral cycle. Let us take a look at what's happening in Nakawa.
It didn't work out as expected and as predicted, but we all believe it was in the interest of improving our election practices. And voting materials came in time, and officials were also on time, just that they were challenged by the expectations of the biometrics, the network, which didn't happen. So far, at least, it didn't take too long. So that, because some people they are early workers, much as there is it's a public holiday, but there are people who work even on these public holidays. So a few, I think, missed. I hope they will get some time off to come and find the voting time. But so far, so good. The disruptions are not that escalated as it has been before in some elections.
Let's speak about, have you done, when it comes to mobilizing of the agents, have you accessed the premises? Have you got feedback from them? Is everything moving on well?
Yeah, we are in touch with our coordinators, with our supervisors and some of the agents. And so far, we haven't gotten so many challenges, much as they are there. There are some areas that are heated up, a few people wanting to fight, but security is taking advantage and taking control of the situation. We've done enough mobilization that will see us through, unlike in the past. So we hope for the best.
Updates coming through from Nakawa. Let us now proceed and hear from Chira Municipality. What is happening there today?
Security had to adhere to the Electoral Commission guidelines. No campaign materials allowed at polling stations. However, by 7:30, polling materials were yet to arrive at the polling stations, sending jitters among voters and candidate agents. Unlike other areas of Chira, at Chirinya Primary School, there was an array of hope. Voting materials were on ground and voters were already in line. Same goes for St. Charles Luanga. Save for one hiccup, the voter verification machines malfunctioned. This brought about a fierce exchange between polling assistants and voters. One of the contestants in the Chira MP contest, Semu Junganda, whom we found at Chirinya 1 parish, decried the issue of voting delays.
The materials themselves arrived. The data I came here at 6:30. I wanted to vote because I'm supposed to feed people who are representing me at polling stations. I have 315 polling stations in Chira. So I have a duty to feed them. But they are holding me here. This is now the 4th hour. Voting hasn't started. You can see the lane where I vote from. People started lining up, now they are sitting.
Yes. I think the organization of the election by the organizers has been shabby, is showing a lot of incompetence. All the problems that we are facing, we are foreseen. For an election as important as this, which happens once in 5 years, and some of the issues we've been raising, like late delivery of materials, like the BVVK machines not having been properly tested, they have almost failed everywhere. I've not heard of a polling station in Chira which is using them. They have.
Well, more stories coming through across various polling stations. Again, we are looking at over 50,000 polling stations, and there in Chira, the conversation is the same. You know, delayed delivery of machines, delayed delivery of voting materials, and also the failure of the machines from working. But we want now to turn away from, you know, the Chira municipality.